Awesome. And we're going to take off that graphic. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming to our Skycom's first live event. This is our first time doing a live event, and I thought, what a better way to do it than do a live event about how to make a live event great. I just thought that was a funny topic, and I think that it's really relevant in today's virtual world that we're all in and that we're all been experiencing for the past year. It's been crazy. I have a special guest with me, Nick Caddis, and I'm going to just fade him in now because I am switching this show as well. So you'll see I'm in front of, I'll show you a little bit later in the broadcast here. I am in front of my own virtual production setup because that's what I've been doing at Skycomp, helping them out with that. And Nick, of course, has been doing live productions all over the place, based in Hamilton, doing some amazing work. And what a perfect guest to have on this. So Nick, thank you for coming. I just want to introduce Nick to those of you who don't know him, who are watching us live. Nick Caddis is how I would describe him is a production powerhouse. He knows everything, all the letters of the alphabet, on how to put together a live event, a video production, design, anything that you could dream up in a creative field, in a creative realm. Nick can probably figure it out and do a spectacular job at it. So Nick is here. I'm super excited to have him. He's worked with some big clients like BMO, like Inuit QuickBooks, that same kind of company. He's also done a whole bunch of stuff. We worked on a whole bunch of live events together with Sports Canada TV. We traveled across Canada doing some pretty crazy cool live events setup. So Nick, welcome. Thank you again. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sebastian Voth. I am the new digital media specialist at Skycomp Solutions. It's Skycomp's kind of first time breaking into a marketing scene, breaking into this kind of role. And I'm so thrilled, excited to be at Skycomp and doing this. Yeah, we're trying a whole bunch of new things. This is our first webinar, so we're trying this out. And with my events background and our amazing technology support, we're here, and yeah, this is what we're doing. So this is part one of hopefully a long series of Fireside Tech Talks. So again, thank you so much for coming if you're an attendee. And of course, if you think of questions throughout this kind of talk, you can go over to our Q&A feature in the Microsoft Teams live event feature. You can ask a question. We have our good buddy, Ty, who's out in the hallway, socially distant from me. He is moderating the chat, making sure that we get some fun questions in. And hopefully we touched on some topics that help you with live events and help you maybe create your next live event. That's the goal of this, is to give you some tips, some ideas, and to help you along the way with your next live event. So Nick, let's jump into the first topic here. Let's get right into talking about this, because people are probably tired of hearing me talking already. I've been rambling for how long now? We're making great time. So the first topic, and what this whole webinar, this whole live event is based off of, is what makes a live event or webinar great. You know, what makes it great. So I have a whole bunch of things that come to mind, and I can start with the first thing is accessibility to your live event. So today, people probably found it hopefully very simple to come in, join the meeting. It's a simple, you get an email after you've clicked the registration link, filled out a form, you get sent an email automatically, and you can click join now and you're in. It's that simple. So Nick, I don't know what your experience has been with your past live events and how things have worked on that end. But if you want to, yeah, like, what are your thoughts on accessibility to an event, and what do you think makes it successful in that way?
For sure. And Seb, first off, thank you to you and SkyComp for having me and for organizing this. I think this is great. You bring up a great point in terms of streamlining and removing any barriers for people to get, from your link or from their calendar invite directly into the meeting. And that's kind of ubiquitous across platforms. Anytime that you send somebody to an event, you don't want them to have to work hard to get into it. So I think that's a great point and very important. I would add to that typically when we're looking at live streams, especially if we're working with clients, we really want to figure out who the live stream is for and what the purpose of it is. And that helps to define how we're going to communicate or promote it. And so that comes to accessibility, as you mentioned, and accessibility in this sense, meaning how people are actually logging on to the stream, not accessibility features like IOTA compliance, but accessibility is just how they get there. And then even thinking about things in terms of, where are people accessing it? Is it something that's going to be an event like this, which we're hosting today in Microsoft Teams? Is it going to be in Zoom? Those are two platforms that people are very familiar with. Or is it going to be a public-facing event on a social channel like Facebook or YouTube? So I think that's also important to consider what platform you're going to be using and where you're pushing out your content, especially if it is a webinar. Right.
No, those are such key points to make. And I really think with knowing who it's for is a great question because, for SkyComp, we're an IT company. We like security and safety in our anything online. We have firewalls and backups and everything put in place to make sure that, no one from the dark web, from, hackers can get in and mess up our show or mess up our live event. And I mean, further mess up our clients' information and private information and private data. So for SkyComp, our answer to that question would be, no, we want to use Microsoft Teams because it's secure, it's safe. That's why we're using this platform, and that's what makes sense for us. But for another person, a Facebook Live event makes perfect sense. If they're not concerned about security, if they're, a social media based company anyway, we are trying to be, but that's a work in progress. But that's a huge point. I love that. Now on from accessibility, talking about engagement and keeping people engaged. So we are doing a very simple show today, and some could argue that Sebastian, you're talking about engagement and you're doing a boring two talking head show. But what I wanted to do with this whole production, whole project, is I wanted to show you a little bit of behind the scenes and make things interesting that way. So I can actually cut to an angle here because I'm using vMix, using different, more advanced production software. I can actually show you what it looks like from the outside. So I can just cut to that right now. And you'll see Nick there in the bottom right-hand corner, I guess, of your screen. And then I have a bunch of different angles of me in the same shot. And yeah, what I can show you kind of from a distance is this scale of this setup. And I think having multiple camera angles, having a little bit of interesting, different ways of showing off your audience or your host, your presenters is key. I think that's a really important thing to do. So I don't know what your thoughts are in engagement when it comes to these kind of live events. And you have, again, you're talking about experiences with even on Facebook and social media, not just one that you can book online. So what do you think about engagement, and what have you seen and what have you done with companies to kind of make live events more engaging?
Definitely, and maybe to kind of expand that idea in general. When it comes to engagement, it's such a broad word in terms of how are people engaging. And I think what you're bringing up is a great idea, which is thinking through what is the actual experience of people who are going to be on, we'll call it a stream or a webinar. What are they seeing on the actual feed? And in addition to that, how are you making it more than just two talking heads? But hopefully this is an infotainment session, so we're going to be a little bit educational and keep people involved that way.
Right.
But the idea being that what are you showing to people to keep their attention? And that's our baseline for engagement. And in addition to that, when we get into the more advanced productions, adding those slightly higher production value elements like graphics, lower thirds, pulling in social content, I think that's a really great way that you can show the interactivity of social, especially when it comes to things like live content. And it works really well, especially in these contexts, if you want to do something like a Q&A, which I think we may have later as well.
Yes.
So hopefully I'm not getting too far ahead of myself.
No, you're not.
To your point about how to keep people engaged, I think that is a perfect example.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, we definitely have a Q&A coming up later, and you'll definitely be able to ask questions to both of us who are, I would say by now Nick 100% definitely is an expert in this field. I am obviously still learning about live events and still figuring things out. And I'm going to argue that if you're starting live events, if this is something that interests you, if you're showing up today and watching this, and you're like, I don't know anything about it, but I want to get into it. I think it's a great place to start, one, and you can start at any level. There are so many different levels of software and different levels of production software, and even the big three, like Nick mentioned, like Zoom and Teams and even WebEx and using Facebook Live. There are so many different features that you can use within those programs and software that aren't so complicated, that any user can kind of figure out and learn with some YouTube tutorials, or maybe calling an expert for help. So yeah, we were speaking about engagement, we were speaking about keeping people's attention, but yeah, there are so many places to go with engagement and different softwares, and like Nick mentioned when we were talking about accessibility, we have to think about who it's for in the end, right? And that all kind of plays together. So it's accessible for this specific type of person, for the IT company, like I gave in the example using SkyComp, but it's also engaging to maybe IT people or whatever your audience is. You want to craft that event. And I think a good example to bring up, if I can bring it up, of the more recent event that I got a chance, Nick called me up one day and said, hey, I need help with a live stream coming up. I need you to run graphics and kind of be my right-hand man here, because it's going to be a lot of moving parts. And like it usually is with live events, but talking about the Quesada event, and those of you who don't know what Quesada is, it's a burrito. It's a burrito bowl, kind of like the same style as Subway. If you were to go to Subway and build a sandwich, they build a burrito for you. And it's a really great little restaurant. It's a chain all over Canada. There's one where I live. There's tons all over the place. And Nick got the opportunity to create a live event for them. So what was that process like for you? What was I think you were working directly with the CEO of that company. So how was that experience?
Yeah, definitely. And we were very fortunate. This is kind of the best case scenario where the company that you were working with, or the end client, also happens to make delicious Mexican-inspired food. So that never hurts. But in this example specifically, we were contacted by an external agency who was working with Quesada to put together more or less an influencer event to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And they reached out to us and they were just asking, how do we make this more than a Zoom call? Effectively, how do we make it a little bit more, to borrow the phrase, engaging? And so we were able to come in and kind of work through the general concept with them. We ended up bringing in guests. We had an influencer who is cocktail inspired, Miss Rebecca J. She was coming to us from Alberta at the time. We had a lovely host, Pei Chen, who we brought in remotely from Toronto. And then obviously we had set up a remote setup at one of the restaurant locations, following all social distancing guidelines and coronavirus guidelines. And the idea there was that we were then able to take 3 different feeds and mix them together with some great graphics. The company provided some excellent B-roll that we were able to include, and shout out to their art director as well, who helped us make sure that everything was on brand. And so that was really what we were trying to focus on, is what's the piece of content and who is it for? Where is it going? So the platform was Zoom, but we integrated our live streaming setup into the back end. And then how do we make sure that we make it a higher production value than just people joining a conference call? And the way that we did that was through graphics, through bringing in interesting people, having a demonstration, and then also being able to have that ethos of the CEO doing a demonstration as well.
Right. And what was really cool about that is you had a live burrito building and cooking registration, or not registration, sorry, wrong word. You had demonstration, there we go, we got there, of, yeah, he was building a burrito on camera, which was so cool. And the brilliant setup of that, so apologies if I get too technical here, but he was running 2 separate cameras on 2 separate feeds and was able to switch remotely from a studio. So the level that you can go in live production and live events in production size and scale and value is because of technology, because what technology allows us to do is phenomenal. It's amazing what you can do now. And there are some limitations still, but there's almost no limitations. You can really make anything work if it fits the budget. And that kind of brings up the next topic of conversation here, which is, what kind of resources do I need? What kind of technology do I need, right? So we're talking about vMix, we're talking about Zoom, we're talking about WebEx, all these different platforms. If you're someone just starting out, you're just trying to figure out all this stuff, a Teams live event might make sense. I'm doing right now, I can cut to this shot again of my crazy 4-boxness. Right now I'm using, and I'm sorry, a 4-box is a term, an industry term that we use that is just 4 boxes on screen. So there's a little tidbit of information for you there as well. But you can see I have something going on this screen here. This is the vMix running the main part of the call. I actually have Nick looped in, calling in through vMix. vMix has its own virtual calling software similar to Zoom, but it's within here. And on top of that, I'm bringing that in via a capture card system into this laptop here in front of me, which is then streaming the event out to you. So there's a little bit of a technical breakdown on what's actually going on here. And this is a quite expensive setup. And I'm lucky to be, we'll fade back here. I'm lucky to be working at an IT company where we have access to this technology, and we find it really fun and exciting here to be using this technology. So we kind of buy all the fun toys. But if you're not fortunate enough to do that, Nick, I don't know what lower budget stuff you've worked on, or maybe you've consulted on to help people find out kind of what they should use. I know I've told people like Zoom webinar features great, and Teams, like I've really pushed those as options. And Nick, you do work in the higher budget realm of things, and you do work on the bigger budget projects, which is really exciting. But do you have any advice for people that are maybe just starting out, just trying to figure out between Zoom and Teams and WebEx what they can do? Where's a good starting point for them, but with technology in general?
Definitely. And I think this is a really interesting point, especially in the context of the last year, because live has been something that's been fairly prevalent, but typically on social networks or for major events, something like an Apple or a Tesla product launch. Right. And what we saw over the past year is more accessibility for smaller companies, different brands, different providers. Social companies like Instagram rolled out the ability to have multiple people in a call at the same time, which is really interesting. And so in terms of what we're looking at, there's a whole gamut of resources that people can use to do webinars and to do live. Seb, the ones that you're mentioning, the WebEx, the Zoom, the Teams, typically when we look at those, I see those as mid to high range production value potential. Again, because you're integrating the capture card system and you're actually, the feed that you're putting in there is a little bit more higher produced or higher production quality, pardon me, than just that conference call. But at the other end of the gamut too, I think people have resources. If you have a lower budget, you can typically look at things like Restream or StreamYard, which are great resources that are browser-based, that allow people to be brought in from all over, just using a link, which is great. They don't have quite as much capability as some of the switchers, the technology that we use for our higher budget professional things. But the idea there being that it allows you to do a bit more of an advanced webinar or live stream using something that is accessible essentially to anybody who has access to the internet. And then moving to the far side of the gamut as well, that's when you start to get into higher end production things, which is involving live switching. You're looking at technology like TriCasters, which are hardware switchers and encoders, vMix, which is a software switcher and encoder. And typically there's some additional things that go along with that, but that's when you really want to get into that area that we like to call advanced video production. And so that's more than a single feed, that's more than 2 feeds. That's when you're mixing and you have producers bringing people in from across the country, but you have control over what's being switched. So you can really land anywhere on that spectrum. It's just a matter of, again, who is your presentation for, what is your budget, and what's the production value you're looking to present? And I think that correlates really strongly with how are you looking to represent the brand or company that you are essentially putting that event on for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's amazing. And speaking about just the different levels of technology that are out there, we're doing that hybrid system like I mentioned, and we couldn't, like the 2 box that you're seeing. So we saw the 4 box earlier. Now we're seeing a 2 box on the program feed with a little logo up in the top, right? Nothing too complicated, nothing too fancy. When we're talking about Teams and we're talking about Zoom, there aren't really a way to do that without using a capture card and a software switcher or a hardware switcher. You need that extra level. So if you're looking at the stream right now and you're saying to yourself, hey, I think it'd be really cool to have like a little logo in the top corner, and I think it'd be really cool to have the 2 people on the screen at the same time, like side by side like this. I think it'd be really cool. I know Zoom can do a little bit of that. I know Teams can do none of that. You have to bring it all in virtually like I am through a virtual input. But yeah, it's really depends on where your budget's at. Can you reach, do I need that level of production for the client that I'm working with? Or can I get it, can I do just a simple live stream with just a camera and maybe a slideshow presentation or something with that? So no, I hope that we answered the question of what technology do people need to start out, and beyond that, where they can go. And something that we didn't mention, but that we've worked with before as well. Myself and Nick had the privilege of going out to Red Deer in 2019 to work on the Canada Games, which was a huge, spectacular and exciting event to be a part of. I had the best time of my life out in Red Deer, and it was like -40. We were up on ski slopes. Nick was lucky enough to be directing a lot of these shows because that's his specialty. So he was nicely, inside a warm building, whereas I'm operating a camera out on a ski slope. Regardless, I'm jealous of that, his warmth at that time. But he got to use a great system which is called Zixi, and I actually, with Serge here at SkyComp, we got to use that at the Henley Regatta. If you're a fan of those events, the regattas that happen, unfortunately canceled this year, of course, but they'll happen again in a few years, I'm sure, or next year. But we got to use Zixi, and what Zixi is essentially is you can put a camera anywhere in the world that there's cell service, and that camera gets picked up. That camera signal gets picked up by cell service, just like your cell phone here. And it gets sent back to the little Zixi box, which is a little orange box. And from there, you get to, just broadcast out live. And you can switch those cameras, those camera feeds. It's spectacular. It is so cool to watch. And Nick, yeah, I mean, your experience was that, you got to do a couple events with that. And a lot of the events we did were just, classically running cable, and they weren't as big. But what was your experience with those with the Zixi platform? How was that for you?
Yeah, it was very interesting. And I think what was so cool about that was at the time we were both working with a production company who had contracted us to come in and help run that event, which was Sports Canada TV. People we're still very close with to this day. And the idea there was that this was a fairly highly produced event, obviously because of the level that it is meant to be broadcast at, or streamed at rather, since technically it is not broadcasting. But the idea behind this was that there were actually cell towers put in place to extend the range of the internet, which allowed us to go to various locations throughout Red Deer and the surrounding area simply connecting an LTE stick to cameras that were enabled with that technology. And then it was phenomenal to be able to essentially be able to send somebody into a forest, or Seb, I believe in your example, we sent you up onto a hill and then forgot to send a snowmobile to pick you up afterwards, but that's neither here nor there. But the idea was that we were able to take a signal from effectively anywhere, which is super, super powerful when you think about it. Obviously, the cold in that case played a role.
Right.
The two things that you would typically need are internet and power for that type of setup.
Right. That was another.
But fortunately, the LTE exactly provided the internet for us, and then with a couple spare batteries in our pocket and the ability to switch between multiple things, that is a very, very powerful technology. And we're even seeing that now with other technologies like NDI, like SRT, and a lot of browser-based things. So even though it's not quite Zixi and you're not able to take a device just in and start streaming from the camera, what's been really cool to see is the democratization of the ability to have people bring in a video feed from anywhere.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. And that was, that was 2019 technology. Now it's 2021, right? So just imagine how far that technology has come now. And speaking to Zixi again, I was lucky enough, again, working with Sports Canada TV, where I was out in Kingston, Ontario, doing it was for U Sports. It was it was a type of marathon running or long distance running. I cannot remember the name of the event for the life of me right now, but that's okay. We had in the University of Queens, we were set up in their athletics center with a small switcher, and this was last year. And then we sent out cameras, the Zixi cameras, way out to an island. That was, you couldn't, it was so far away, and it just connected simply, just like that, and it was beautiful. Zero delay. That's the other thing. When you're watching live sports, from a traditional broadcaster like Dome Productions or Sportsnet or whoever you're watching, you're getting that feed no delay because they have satellites and crazy fast broadband network speeds that they can just get things to their viewers like that, right? That's not a problem. For us smaller broadcasters and for us wanting to do webinars and live events from our homes, we don't have those capabilities, but people expect them, right? Because they've seen, I've watched live events and live TV. That's how it should be, right? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that to get that zero delay, zero latency. So, and it's unfortunately, in most cases, it's a pay-to-win system. You just have to buy a faster internet speed, or you have to spend more budget on a Zixi system that can get you that zero delay, or work with a company like Dome Productions. But I don't know. I don't know if for a small at-home live event you would want that bill from Dome Productions after that. I think that would be a little bit too much to handle for some just people working from home. So we covered a lot there about technology and the resources that are available to you, and something that we didn't really touch on that I think is important is just camera quality in general. And you can see, I'll switch again to my 4-box mate just so you can see the different camera angles that I have. We're working with some higher level, prosumer is the term that I would use for these kind of cameras. And they are, you can see, the quality is very high. It's very good. And Nick, I think you're sitting in your place with a C200. It's more of like a cinema camera, which is.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's spectacular. So you might be looking at our feeds right now and you're saying, wow, these guys look like crisp and they look great. And how do I get to that level? And it's actually easier than you think. There's lots of options with DSLRs that you can get an HDMI output from and use those cameras. If you own a DSLR like a Canon T5i, those do a good job of creating a good signal. So if you have an old DSLR sitting in the corner and you want to join or host a live event, you probably could and get a great video signal without breaking the bank. But another thing that you can do that we have done and Nick has done on a lot of his events, and it makes sense from a business standpoint, but it also makes sense just in life in general when renting equipment, because you don't need to own that gear. You know it's there at VizTech, at AV Shop, at White's, wherever you're renting it from in Toronto. There's actually, I can shout out these guys from Niagara that this year, through the pandemic, they're a video production company, Mitchell Riley Pictures. I'll tag them below when this recording is released, but they have a rental place in Niagara now where you can rent cinema quality gear for an affordable price for what it is. So there's options out there. Renting is an option. If you're worried about, okay, I want that quality, but I can't buy a cinema camera. That's not my business. We're, a law firm. Like, what are we going to do with that, right? So it's a good thing to know about and to have in your back pocket.
Seb, if I may on that note as well, I think something else has been really great over the past year, just going back to what we were saying earlier about how these things have become a little bit more prevalent. I also think we've seen a little bit more acceptance in terms of what is kind of considered commonplace on this type of production. So for example, today, I am wearing a lav mic, which is a higher quality microphone than would normally be found in say, a set of AirPods. But exactly that, my earpiece today is not an IFB. It's not a broadcast professional earpiece. I am wearing consumer AirPods, not even the Pros. So even having things like this to make it even be a little bit more, I can be away from my computer. I can be doing a demonstration. You and I have both worked with a host who is also a part of the Food Network who, when she happens to do a live stream, she does it with AirPods. And what's been exciting is that's completely acceptable. And that goes back to your point as well in terms of you don't necessarily have to have the C200 like I do, which is a part of my business, obviously, because we do higher end productions,
right?
But you can have, a high quality camera in your iPhone, for example. And so if you are looking to do a live stream at home, I would say something else to consider is, what's the threshold of production value you need to have? And at what point do you need to make that jump to renting cinema gear and knowing how to use that cinema gear? But also if you have an iPhone, if you have a camera lying about the house and you have access to a capture card, you can easily plug that into your computer or consider buying an iPhone tripod, right, from a local retailer, preferably support local businesses.
Yes.
Ideally in this case, but yeah, being able to set that up, and then theoretically you have what would be considered a great quality camera for a certain level of production for very little cost. So just some additional food for thought there.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And yeah, it's not expensive anymore to buy a capture card. They've come way down in price, and no, you're not getting the high level SDI to HD. Like, you're not getting the high level 4K capture card that's beautiful quality. You're maybe getting something that's just HD, but we're in HD right now and it looks great. So that's, you can afford it. There is a possibility of finding that and implementing that in your business, especially because everything is virtual now. That's the important part of this, right? You're virtual, you might as well make it look good. If you can't, that's cool. We respect it. There is, like you said, people are accepting of a little bit lower quality now, and that's great. It makes it easier for us on our work when the stream might cut out. There's like, oh, it's just a quality thing. That happens all the time, right? We really strive for that excellence of not cutting out, and that's the difference between maybe hiring someone to come on and do your production versus doing it yourself. So maybe that's kind of another big point I think we both wanted to bring up of what's the importance of hiring someone. And it brings the question, so how do I run a great webinar from home? This is the question that if you're attending this event right now, and thank you again for joining us today on a lovely Thursday evening. The question you're asking is, how do I run a great webinar from home? And I ask the question back now, should you or should I, right? Or you're asking yourself that question now because you've heard all of these great resources and great stories from us and our professional backgrounds. Oh, well, I'll just hire, Fellows agency to do my next live event. But
I mean, I would love to talk if that's the case, but I'll leave that till the end.
Yeah. So how do we run a great webinar from home? We've talked about all the different technology that you want to use. We've talked about how to keep people engaged, how to, make it accessible, for people able to join easily to this kind of event. But really, what are the steps that you want to take at home to make sure that your webinar is successful as this one is, where, knock on wood, we're not cutting out internet right now. And a big part of that right now is I'm sitting in Skycomp Solutions office. We have a server room, a data center here. We have backup generators here. So if the internet goes down or the power goes out, I'm still good. I'm still streaming. This event's still happening, right? That's a luxury that we have here at Skycomp. But we're talking about if you are at home, now what do I do? Right? So there's, you can talk about getting better internet. You can talk about having a good internet speed and a reliable internet speed. And you can talk about what kind of different software is affordable for you. So I think we should just touch on definitely the internet speed as an important bit of all this. And again, I mentioned I'm very lucky. I'm bragging now that we have a great internet speed here. But we're an IT company. We have to. So that's just just comes with the territory. All right. If we had bad internet,
we'd have some questions if you didn't. Yeah.
If I was like glitching and moving slowly, there would be a problem here. But we're not. So Nick, you're from home right now. And how are you setting up your internet speed, and how are you making sure that your feed is staying strong? I say that and knocking on wood so it doesn't just drop on us right now as I say that. But
yeah, that would be the exact thing that would happen in this case if we weren't so well prepared.
Right.
And we weren't experts in this space. And the idea there is that, again, drawing a through line from what we started this conversation with is that idea of preparation and really thinking through who and what you're trying to push content out to, but also what resources you're going to need access to, which we touched on in terms of the spectrum of different live streaming software that you can use to present your webinar. And this is really kind of on the other end of those considerations, the hardware side of things. So with internet, most residential internet, is typically around 25 megabits upload. Probably 15 megabits download. And to put that in context for people at home, typically when you're doing a high quality video stream out, you're using anywhere between 3 to 5 megabits. So if you think about that, especially if you're doing something where you have multiple guests coming in and out and communicating back and forth, for anybody who has been at home with their partner or a loved one or children who are, using the internet for school at the same time, the more people you add onto a network, the slower your network speed is going to become. So especially if you're doing a live event from home, I would encourage you to check with your internet provider in terms of the maximum speed you can have in your area. And if you're having something that's a little bit on the lower end, say 10 megabits upload to 15 megabits upload, maybe consider upgrading your package, even if it's only for a short amount of time or however long you're doing an event, to maybe consider 25 as a baseline. And that's more just meant to make sure that your signal doesn't drop out. And then the other thing you can do related to that is I would highly encourage, if you are doing something from a computer, if you're not doing it from a mobile device, consider hardwiring your connection. And what we mean is, rather than running your connection off wireless, figure out where your router is stashed there at your house. Sometimes we know they can be over a fireplace, or some of it's fairly inconvenient, but we would recommend pick up a good Ethernet cable, something like a Cat5, Cat6, and that's just a certain rating to mean that there's a certain speed that's able to flow through that cable.
Right.
And connect that to your computer. And what that will do is that will solidify your connection, and that way you won't have the awkward freezing and dropouts that happen, if your wireless signal gets interrupted. So that's some ways that you can kind of think ahead and help to mitigate those potential issues with the internet when you're looking to run a live event from home.
Right. And if you, hire a production company or a live stream production company to do something like this, they have what's called possibly an LTE modem that they can bring with them. And, LTE modems are very expensive items because it's like buying a cell phone that runs a modem. It's a large cost. So most live stream production companies are going to want to hardwire to a network because it's going to save you cost as the owner of the business who's doing the live stream, because they're billing for that LTE time. But it's also just better to go off of your own network. It's more secure, and it's a safer thing. But a production company that has that LTE modem will be able to have a backup plan. So yes, your internet goes out, it drops below something, that LTE modem can kick in and kind of save the day for you. So yes, it's good when working from home to have that high internet speed. If you're working with a company that has that LTE modem, that has those options, that's great. Even if I've seen it done, and to me, it hurts because, I mean, my data plan's okay. But, streaming from a hotspot, it's been done. It is possible. It is a thing. I don't recommend it because your data bill, unless you have the amazing plan, is going to be way too high to even fathom. But if that's your only resort, if you're, if someone's watching Netflix in that room, someone's on online school in the next room, and you just have no other option, it's better to, in my opinion, have a stream that's secure, like just solid and flowing nicely and not cutting in and out. And then, I'd pay for the extra bill on the cell phone if I had to just make it higher quality and better for the viewers, especially if it's a live event. If it's just a meeting, that's a whole nother topic. But live events, I think what people are looking for now is just like a solid stream, clear, crisp audio that, people can understand and grasp. So I hope we're doing that for you today. It is so fun to be on the other side of it because our experience is only behind the scenes. We're only ever switching, directing, operating a camera, give or take, either or of any of those options. We're doing those. And I'm just so curious how you're feeling about being on camera and talking about this stuff, Nick. It's
completely unnatural. Hopefully I'm doing okay thus far, but yes, it's very irregular that I would be on this side.
It's so fun, and it just goes to show, if two camera geeks, if I can call you camera geek, Nick, I think that's what we would call ourselves, or I guess technology.
I mean, I won't take it the wrong way.
Right, it's a compliment in any capacity, but yeah, I think for two of us to be on here, showing off that we can do a live event, I think, and host it and speak on camera, I think that anyone can do it. I think that's another big takeaway from this. That's always, we talk about the technology, we talk about all these other details, but I think having someone who is engaging as a host and who can really, take the event from start to finish is really important. And what's really awesome about that phrase is because we're almost nearing the end of our webinar. So hopefully we have done that for you. We have kept you engaged, kept you interested in what you're looking for. And there are some questions coming in, which is very exciting. So we can jump into the question period. I hope that so far we've given you enough information, and of course we want to ask, or we're just going to look here, and I'm just going to read some of these questions here. So we're talking about acronyms. So there were some questions about acronyms. So we use a lot of different acronyms in video production, and it's so funny.
Hopefully we can answer these.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that this gets asked because I think I can speak for lots of different technical minds out there. When we say an acronym, we just know what it is, and we don't really think about what that letter stands for. That group of letters. We just know, okay, that's an HDMI cable. So someone said SCI. SDI is what is probably didn't come through clearly with this mic. So that's SD. D is in door, I, so SDI. So that's just a coax cable. That's a cable that you would see normally out and about in like your cable box in the back of your TV. So like SDI and HDMI and the others you mentioned are challenging for non-techies. Do you have a downloadable resource that explain all that techie talk? Now, that's a good question. We do have a resource pack that's going to be sent to your email if you've registered for this event and you're attending this event. It'll be emailed out to you, and it kind of highlights everything we've talked about and some more. For things like SDI and HDMI, the best way to find out those acronyms is to just type them into Google, and they'll be the first response that comes up. That's my knowledge. And if there's an acronym that I don't understand, I've Googled it and it finds it, which is, I'm just admitting that Google has saved me many times. But that's kind of the truth. And I also was lucky enough to study in school for broadcasting and technology. So we learned those acronyms in that sense. So it wasn't too crazy learning about them. Like, I've just known about them. But yeah, it's definitely worth a Google or asking an expert, right? Just going, say, hey, I heard this cable was a thing. Can you let me know what this means, what it does? And usually they're going to answer. They might chuckle a bit because it's just a funny question to ask what it means, but yeah, no, it's a valid question.
May I use this? May I use this opportunity to just build on your point?
Yeah.
I think my camera has actually, in classic live streaming faux pas, it is actually back focused here. So I'm going to use this opportunity to break the fourth wall.
I love this.
And maybe actually, if you don't mind, to help explain this a little bit for people who are asking these questions, because it makes tons of sense. And the way that we talk about these things is technical. Hold on a moment. I'm just going to.
Yeah.
Magic. Fantastic. We're back. And I'll use that opportunity to grab, my bag of little backup items here. Yeah. But for the person asking that question at home.
Oh, there we go.
Shift through some cables here. So I actually have an example of, this is an HDMI cable. You may be very familiar with it.
Yeah.
From your home resources. And forgive my camera is on autofocus just to keep it in there. And then this is an SDI cable.
Look at that.
Which you may recognize. And
it'll focus eventually. It'll come to us. There it is.
There we go. So this SDI cable, typically recognizable by its circular shape.
Oh, we can actually cut
the
to
acronyms aren't so much important as understanding what they are used for. Thank you very much. So again, HDMI and SDI. See if we can get this to focus.
It'll jump. There it is.
There we go. So this is the HDMI. These are typically the ones that you'll see in consumer products at home. You might have one plugged into the back of your TV. And then this is SDI. This is typically used in a little bit more professional productions. The reason being that it actually has a locking mechanism. So when you twist this onto a connection, you will lock it in place, and that's what keeps it from coming out. And typically they're a little bit more flexible and bendable, so they can go a longer distance, whereas HDMI don't transmit signals as far. But the one thing that I would say is generally, if you're somebody who is going to be live streaming at a certain level, you will typically be using HDMI cables for the most part. So going back to your note about capture cards and things like that, if somebody is going to be connecting a device from home, most likely you'd be using an HDMI cable.
Yeah, look at that. I love that in-depth answer. And we actually have examples
here.
Yes,
I do just have cables at the ready.
If you're a true broadcast professional, you do just have cable. I mean, I'm looking around myself now. If I cut to like any wider shot, I'll just do this right now. Like, you'll see, like, there are just cables everywhere, and I'm just surrounded in technology and equipment, and I love it.
But you know exactly where they're going.
Right. We'll say I definitely do. I set this all up. I've been working on this this setup for about a week. So to put things into context, it's been a fun time building out this and to make sure that it all works for today. So it's working and it's successful. So we had another question here. Is it important for webinars or similar live events to become or remain as evergreen content? Or in which situations is it valuable to keep a recording when you have it available to you? So that I'll let you take that question, Nick. That sounds good.
Definitely. And can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah.
So I make sure I answer the full
Yeah. So is it important for webinars or live events to become or remain as evergreen content? So I think they mean just content that you can keep posting and sharing and using in the future, even after the event's over.
Yeah, definitely. And immediately what I would say to that is I would be thinking about what is the event that I'm doing? So what is the webinar about? And who is my audience for it? Because the great thing about live content especially is there is typically very little to no post-production, which is the editing process. So after you tape something, you would then typically edit a video together. With live content, the nice thing is that whether it's evergreen or whether it's topical and something that's going to be in the moment, You can cut it up afterwards into different parcels and packages, and you can use that for your social strategy. You can use that for inspiring blog posts. There are ways that that content can live on and have an afterlife. But to answer your question right off the top, I would say typically it depends what the purpose of your event is. So for example, if you have a product launch, if you have something that you are communicating to a group of people internally, so you're doing a little bit high production value of a stakeholders meeting or something along those lines, or you're presenting something new to a group of people, that content won't necessarily be evergreen because you are making it about something that is very topical and has a timeline to when you are launching it. On the other side of things, something like this, Seb, I think this is a great example of potentially evergreen content. We're getting a little bit into some references to things that are happening, on a timeline outside of this, but theoretically somebody after this event will be able to watch the recording of this and hopefully find it valuable regardless of whether or not they are trying to watch it 2 months from now, a year from now. And I say that, the camera geek, to use your term, and knows that the technology changes so quickly. But on the note of evergreen content versus non-evergreen content, I would say, what are you trying to achieve with that content? If it is something that you want to be able to reuse over and over again and not necessarily allude to a specific time when it's being put out there, I would say make sure that you script and you plan to avoid any reference. It's not saying that, today is, for example, June 4th, and we are doing a live stream, or June 3rd and doing a live stream, pardon me. So that's what I would say to that. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say about scripting it so that it sounds not, that it can be used at a different time. So that's a really good point to make, because there are many times when I'm editing a video for SkyComp or I'm working on a different live event, whatever it is, and you hear someone say something that's a specific reference to something that happened, whatever in that time frame, and then to me it makes like, oh well, I can't share that part of the event. That doesn't make sense for anyone else that wants to watch that recording. So I think we've been pretty careful of avoiding those moments, but I mean, this I can chop up and create tons of different snippets and different, because we have different topics that we've spoken about. So we can take this and put it anywhere, I believe, and it can benefit both SkyComp and Fellows Agency, and we can work together on sharing and promoting that stuff. Because
and the benefit as well that I would just tag on to the end of that is theoretically using this content afterwards. Like you said, you can take out the parts that aren't evergreen.
Right.
Theoretically, if you do an hour-long live stream or a 2-hour-long event or something like that, that may be a little bit too long of a time commitment for somebody who just wants to really get at the golden nuggets of information that you're trying to produce from here. So you have the ability to really trim those down and present a much more concise, a much tighter version of the content if you want to, or even potentially present, just a couple minutes at a time of the most salient points, which I think is very, very powerful when you think about the investment, both in time, effort, and money that you're making to do something like a live event or a webinar, and really thinking about how you can kind of extend the life of those things afterwards, and again, serve the purpose of why you are doing the event in the first place.
Right. And what's using ourselves here today as an example, we're kind of doing an off-the-cuff, very live, very kind of raw presentation of this. And I believe when I want to watch a live event, it is raw, it's live, it's real. That's why it's a live event. If I wanted to watch scripted content, I would go click on a recording, or I would watch a film that's been recorded and edited and put together. So I think that live events are, the time to be live and be real. You know what I mean? So it's not only just for, for evergreen content and pushing that out later, but it can be used for both those things. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Whoever asked that, thank you so much for bringing us that question. And I just have a couple more questions here. And this one's a big question that I get asked all the time. It happens, at least once or twice a month. I get a message, hey, can you do a live stream for me? I'm putting together this event. I'm wondering how much it's going to cost. What's your rate? What do you charge? What does that look like? And I think it's that's a very valid question to ask. And like we mentioned, there are so many different levels to live events and production levels. So depending on your budget, you can make things work in many different ways. But Nick, I'm going to ask you, what is a typical, I'm going to say mid-range production budget cost for a live stream, just for the production team? This is not, talking about bringing in influencers, for example. This is not talking about bringing in like a professional host to host your event. We can keep their paychecks out of this, but just talking about the technology aspect and the production team and building the graphics, all from start to finish, what ballpark number would you say in 2021 would this cost?
Definitely, and it's a super challenging thing to answer when we want to speak in kind of these vague terms, because it is so specific. And the hard part about asking for specifics is that we kind of need to know the details and the brief and the expectations of what we're doing. So, for example, the software that we mentioned on the one end of the spectrum that is accessible to people who just want to sign up for a plan and potentially do live streaming, that software can cost you anywhere from $20 to $40 a month, which is a fairly low cost option in terms of being able to produce a live stream from home. And then you can range all the way up to tiers that we typically look at are kind of 2,500 and below, and then between 5 to 10, and then if it's an event that's going to take a couple of months, 10 plus, depending on the scale and the different things that we're doing. And I don't mean to scare anybody with that information, but there is so much to think about. And within that, you're talking about the production value itself. So what cameras are you using? What devices are you using? And then another huge component, depending on what you're looking to produce, this is just from our perspective, is how much needs to go into it planning-wise up front. So it's a successful event on the back end for all of the reasons that we've talked about, and making sure that you do get that flawless reporting out of it afterwards that you can chop up and use for your content strategy. That you don't have any audio dropouts or anything like that throughout, and that you're using high-quality mics, or figuring out those different questions. And so all of those things play a role in affecting price. But when it comes to answering the cost of how much something would be priced at, in 2021, it's not that it's difficult to say. It's just that you need to think through the specifics of what you're looking to do, and then typically it's easier to quote once you're able to provide those details.
Right. It's the classic game of, how much does it cost? Well, what's your budget? Right. It's that back and forth that I've battled with many a time. And, it's not that any production company is wanting to gouge you, that's not the point of it. It's just they can do a lot with certain types of budgets. They can do a lot. Yeah. They could, it's not, they just want to work with you and say, okay, you spend this much money, this is what we can provide as a service, right? That's such an important thing.
Apologies, I don't mean to jump in on that point,
Please.
But rather than saying it's that chicken and egg of, what would this cost versus what's your budget? Because that's always, it immediately positions the discussion as kind of oppositional. And the way that we like to evaluate it is kind of saying, what are you looking to do? Because that will help to dictate what is possible. And then from there, depending on what the expectations are, we can typically tailor a couple different levels. And so you could have an option that's saying, hey, this is a single camera on each end. We're just cutting between the two angles, something like that, all the way to a mid-tier level, which is, hey, we're going to bring in, a couple multiple guests. We'll have them switching throughout. We'll handle all of that. And then on the top tier, it's something like, hey, we're going to do an entire graphics package, and we're going to switch people in from, national locations across the country, things like that. And so what it allows us to do is, rather than just immediately going back with, we don't want to hear from you unless you have money. That's not the idea we're trying to take. What we're trying to say is, what can we do, or what are you looking to achieve, and how do we break that down into what do we need to do that? Because we have a lot of equipment in-house, but for example, if there's a specialty item or a service that you're looking for that we need to outsource or contract in order to provide, those are costs that we need to be aware of, because it's very difficult. And the last thing we want to do is have somebody say, hey, I want to do a basic live stream. I have X amount of budget, and then get a request for renting out something like a venue downtown Toronto and bringing in 20 cameras, something that requires a lot of crew. So really having kind of those parameters when we go to look at these discussions, I think that's super helpful. So I hope that helps on the budget question. By no means is that meant to deflect. Really the baseline of what I'm trying to get at is when it comes to thinking about budget, it's always helpful when clients have an idea of what they're comfortable spending, but only when that idea of what they're comfortable spending is in relation to what they're looking to achieve.
Great. Yeah. I mean, that's such a, like, I still have a lot to learn about the budgeting and building and all that part of business in general. And no, that is such a good way of putting it. So I hope that anyone listening out there has taken that advice and understands, where to go next with their live event idea and plan. And maybe it's to Fellows Agency. That'd be super cool. That wouldn't be a bad thing. That's actually all of the questions that we have coming in. So that's really exciting. I appreciate people asking questions and taking the time. I know that I was talking with Serge and with Ty, who's moderating this chat out earlier, and we were just talking about the live event fatigue and the video call fatigue that has happened over this year. So just speaking about how people are just tired of being on these calls and how annoying it is not to be able to just like reach out and, hang out with your friend and chat in person, right? But what I think we can take away from that video call fatigue is why not make live events and video meetings and everything better and higher quality? Why don't we do that? And maybe that will change that fatigue. That's what I think about it. That's what I think is the next step to get out of this funk of, another video call. Let's make it interesting then. Let's put some different camera angles on it, make it fun, make it entertaining, and see where it goes. And I think we can both agree on that, Nick, right? That's where people should take their live events, right?
And may I offer perhaps a closing thought for Mike, just something else just on the tail end of our last discussion point. As well, when we give those price ranges, it's typically us thinking about what we're able to provide. But like we were saying about the different resources out there, if you're open to it, I mean, content like this is great. So thank you again, Seb, for organizing this, because it really helps to broaden horizon and educate people on what's possible and maybe start them on a path of looking into those things. But keep in mind that there's thresholds. There's different levels of these things. There is a certain level of production quality that you're able to do yourself, whether that be with hard device resources, hardware resources, or software resources like some of those app-based programs and browser-based programs that we talked about at the start. Those are great resources which have really come into their own over the past year especially, and hopefully will continue to do so. And then if you are looking for something a little bit above and beyond, then that's typically where we get into the advanced video production. And at that point, somebody like yourself or I are able to come in and kind of have that conversation and figure out what's required. So I think that there's this really, really great trend is the wrong word, but this really great uptick in people looking to produce high quality content like this, which is, as you just said, something we can both agree on, that is always valuable to help people actually feel like it's worth their time to join a live event. You really want them to feel like they are a part of it or like they're getting something out of it. But there are a number of ways that you can do that, ranging from self-produced things that you can do at home to self-produced things that you do for your business, and then lifting off from there all the way up to the advanced video production, where somebody like yourself or I can come in and really lend an extra hand with our knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's exactly what I think. Yeah, people need to hear, because it is definitely for sure frustrating logging into a virtual meeting and not being able to just meet in person. But the possibilities are truly endless when it comes to technology, live events, and just having fun with it is, I think, the biggest thing that people miss when trying to plan a live event. I mean, I know me starting this and planning this one specifically, it was a lot of just, oh man, I got to make sure all my technical details are right, and wait a second, let's have fun with this process. Especially, if you have a more technical mind like myself or Nick, you can afford to play around and figure out what works best technically. If you're not, as technical of a mind or a person, that's cool too. There's a lot of different ways that you can create an engaging event and have fun with it and make it different from what else you've seen. And another great thing to do that I've been doing for the past couple weeks as well is just watching other live events, seeing what other people do, what other crazy ideas have they come up with, and being a part of so many. And working with Nick on a few, it's truly, you learn a lot just from watching them and just from being a part of them. So that's, I guess, my advice. My closing thought is just to go out, experience live events, and look at them with an open mind. Don't come in with the fact of, oh man, another live event. Here we go. Great. More video calls. Lots of people have created lots of new creative ways of making them interesting. So I'm excited to see what maybe you come up with that are watching now, and what other ones we'll see in the future. But yeah, I think we're almost, we're a little bit over time, which is totally cool. A big point that I wanted to make about these live events is keeping things short and sweet. So not keeping people on for 4 hours, right? We're 11 minutes over. I think people will survive. You can ask a question and say, no, Sebastian, we're dying here. End the call. Oh my, end the live stream already. No, they're having a great time. They're having a blast. No, I just want to say a huge thank you to Nick Caddis and Fellows Agency for taking the time today to come out and listen to myself ramble a little bit himself and get out some great information. So just thank you for joining us, Nick. And it was truly a pleasure to have you on, and you've given some really, really helpful advice and helped keep this live event on track as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
If I may, thank you to everybody who asked questions in the chat. That is always appreciated. And thank you to Serge, Ty, Seb, yourself, and the broader SkyComp team for putting this together. It was a pleasure to be there. Awesome.
So with, it's always the fun part about leaving a call is you just hit leave. Like that's the end. That's it. There's no fancy flashy thing. So I'm going to go over to what we use in our production term. We're going to go on an end graphic, and you'll see that end graphic playing. And then, we're just going to say goodbye. I have just some typing in my ear. I'm wondering if Ty is just giving us a last question or a last message before we jump off. I want to make sure that Ty isn't typing anything important to me.
This is where the crucial questions come in. This is the sliding in.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, where can they find us? That is such a great question. Thank you for asking. This is perfect. Thank you for asking that, because we were going to end this live stream and not tell you where to follow us on social media, and that would be terrible. What kind of marketing person would I be? So you can find SkyComp at SkyComp IT across all platforms. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the different social media, like TikTok. You can find us anywhere. We're all over the place. And Nick, if you want to throw in your social media handles, you can throw those in now, because it's always a good time.
Thank you very much. Our website is www.fellows.agency. In addition to that, we are Fellows Agency Inc. on Instagram. And then personally, I am at Nick Caddis on Instagram, and you can also find me on LinkedIn, Nick Caddis.
Perfect. So with the social media tags in, thank you, Ty, for jumping in there at the last second and telling us that we had another question, because that is a really, really important key part we had to throw in there. So thank you so much for all your questions, for your time, for joining us tonight. And we're hitting the 15-minute over mark. So that's time for us to say goodbye. And again, if you are attending this, if you signed up and registered, you will be receiving an info package. It's a nice document that we'll send over to you that highlights everything that we spoke about. So you can share that with friends and family that maybe couldn't make it tonight. and they'll get the same great info. We'll also post this recording later on all platforms, so you'll be able to watch it over and over again. So great. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, everyone watching. And we're just going to end the event. I'm going to go to my graphic really quick here. We're going to go graphic. We're going to fade that in. It is a fireside talk after all. And there's our thank you for watching. There it is. Thank you all.